Dean Legge Show for the week of Georgia's game with Auburn. Georgia finally back into the rankings after a few weeks. Actually, pretty much since that Vanderbilt loss, a bad loss for Georgia. And this week they get, I believe it's their fourth game against a top 10 ranked team this time. The Auburn Tigers, who have really turned it around. And I tell you what, Gene Chizik. Gus Malzahn has done a great job at Auburn. They have really figured out what they're doing with the run game with Nick Marshall, a former Georgia cornerback who is playing quarterback for Auburn. Georgia's going to have a tough test going down there on the plains, but it's a winnable game for Georgia. A lot of guys are back. Chris Conley looks like he will be back this weekend for Georgia against the Tigers. And Todd Gurley will be back. So Georgia could be coming into this game as healthy as they've been since probably the LSU game on offense, and that's a good thing for Georgia. Auburn coming off a huge win. What I mean by huge is they absolutely destroyed Tennessee up there in Knoxville. And Georgia coming off a big win themselves 2 weeks in a row, once against Florida, and then Appalachian State, a Division I AA school, who could not compete very well with the Bulldogs. But nonetheless, let's get straight to the questions. Coming Dog 02 asks, I know people hate to hear it, but is there a chance Georgia wears black against Kentucky? I keep hearing rumors that we're going to do it, but I don't know. P.S. Spare me the responses about gimmick jerseys and all that. Please, I don't care about everyone's opinion on wearing black. I just want to know if Dean thinks this is possible. It's possible, but I think it's very, very unlikely. And the reason why is, I've seen Mark Richt, certainly publicly and privately too, just kind of dismiss it completely. Maybe that means that there's something that could happen in the future. But I think, an 8-4 or an 8-3 Georgia, or even a 7-4 Georgia coming out in black, I think that would be, people wouldn't like that. Now, it would look great on television, and Georgia, of course, was one of the first teams to sort of do an alternate uniform and hype it up a lot. But right now, I don't see that happening against the Cats. But that could change. I mean, if now Missouri doesn't play this week, so they can't lose. But if Georgia were to beat Auburn and then come in and play well against Auburn, not just beat them, but play really well, maybe they could do it. I mean, this is Aaron Murray's last year in Athens. He's one of the few seniors, but he's a consequential one, that's for sure. But right now I don't. But I could see it in the future for sure. You cannot ignore the marketing ploy that University of Oregon and a couple. Now listen, Oregon does it to me. Now this is consensual. Oregon does it right. I was watching Northern Illinois play last night. Just change the jersey a little bit. Don't go crazy with stupidity. If you want to honor the vets, do it in a way that looks good. I mean, that to me, that thing was bad looking last night. Swanee Dog 03 says, do we or should we get to play in Athens 2 years in a row against Auburn? I'll just take that question first. I don't think that is the plan, but I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm the scheduling expert for the SEC. I do know that Auburn will be back in Athens next year. I think everyone knows that. This game was a quirk in the system. Georgia and Auburn still wanted to play each other pretty bad. Georgia didn't want to end up playing Mississippi State or Arkansas or whoever this year. They wanted the rivalry with Auburn to continue, and that's what they got. In order to do that, Georgia had to go to Auburn 2 years in a row. I think Mississippi had to go to Auburn 2 years in a row. So there were a couple of schools that had to do that. I said Auburn, I meant Alabama. Went to Alabama 2 years in a row. It's just a quirk in the scheduling for the SEC. They're going to get this thing completely squared away, I think, in 15 or 16. That's what they say. We'll see. It seemed like Georgia's defense stepped up a notch or two when Trey Matthews got in the game last weekend. Did you notice that, or was that my imagination? They didn't score when Trey Matthews got in there, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was 7-6 and then 14-6, and Trey Matthews played in the second quarter and on. So there's some validity to that. I think, in fact, Appalachian State hardly did anything with the football in the second half, and that was when Trey was in there full time. So It was that all Trey, no. So, but it definitely wasn't just your imagination. I mean, he's a starting safety for a reason, and I think that that's important to remember. UGA Dog Forever 08 says, "What's your prediction for the game this weekend? Do you have a score?" I have a hard time with scores. I don't really like doing scores. I think this game hinges on a couple of different things. If Auburn can do what they want to and not be forced to throw the football, they're going to win. To me, it's that simple. So you're going to need Nick Marshall to throw 20, 25 passes. That will change the trajectory of the Auburn offense. If he's throwing 7 times, Georgia's got a lot of problems. And Auburn under Gus Malzahn has done really well with a mobile quarterback so long as they don't have to throw it repeatedly. And Nick did not have to do that last week against Tennessee. Now, there is some of this, Auburn hadn't played anybody business, which is, I don't know what to make of that. They have not played any of the power teams from the East until this week against Georgia. They've yet to play Alabama. They did play LSU on the road and got beat pretty good. And then they upset A&M on the road by, I think it was a score. So, Auburn's a little bit like Texas A&M. They can score a lot, but they have a hard time stopping the score. So, if Georgia can run the ball effectively, Auburn could be in some trouble. And Todd Gurley is as healthy, I think, as he's been for some times. G Knowles 7 says, this is lengthy. Do you think Auburn has yet really proven that much? They did beat Texas A&M on the road, but if Johnny Football doesn't miss a series, that game could have gone the other way. The only real other test they had was LSU, and they were beaten soundly. Just seeing if you have any insight or whether we should feel good going into this game. I do think Georgia people should feel pretty good going into this game. Auburn has lost to Georgia 6 of the last 7 years. There's something to that. You can't act like that's not a big deal. The other thing, too, is they could very well be looking forward. Excuse me. I mean, I'm almost certain they're looking forward to their matchup with Alabama. I mean, you can't tell me they're not. They beat Washington State by a touchdown at home the first week of the season. That was not impressive. And then they won by 31 over Arkansas State, or 29, whatever it is. They squeaked by Mississippi State, which was really a good win for them. Had they not won that game, I don't know if Auburn would have had the same season they had so far. They lost by 2 touchdowns the week to LSU the week before Georgia beat the LSU Tigers. Then they beat Mississippi, which was something I thought was going to happen, but I guess nobody else did. They won that game at home by 8. They blistered Western Carolina, and then their win of the season, a 45-41 win at Texas A&M. That was the game where, people were saying, "Oh, these guys are legit," and they didn't disappoint that day. That was probably Gene Kizik's. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. Gus Malzahn's hobnail boot moment, if he's going to have one. They double up Arkansas 35-17, and then they blister Tennessee 55-23. So, they've allowed some points here and there. Texas A&M scored on them. Certainly LSU scored on them. But other than that, they played pretty well. We don't really totally know with Auburn. I mean, Auburn's played, I would say, 4 legitimate games. Mississippi State, who is not very good, but it's a legitimate foe at the time. LSU, Mississippi, and Texas A&M. Tennessee has just gone way downhill. Arkansas is quite bad. Georgia's been more tested than anyone else in the SEC. I mean, think about it. They played Clemson, South Carolina, LSU, Missouri, Florida, Tennessee. Both of those games, to Florida and Tennessee, not in Athens, and they will play. They will also play Auburn this week. So Georgia's had a rough schedule. Obviously, this is the 4th top 10 game for them. So we know a lot about Georgia. Particularly, we know a lot about a healthy Georgia. We don't know a lot about some of the other teams that Georgia's played. When we didn't know about LSU the week after they played Auburn, and Georgia got in there and beat them. I don't know who the better team is here. I'm not sure Georgia's not the better team if they can keep Todd Gurley in the game. That's a good question. South Georgia Dog 88 asked probably the most difficult question of this session. What are our boys' bowl prospects after this season after we beat Auburn? Okay, so that's saying Georgia beats Auburn. Um, I don't really know that it changes anything, frankly. I think a win over Auburn for the Bulldogs means certainly they do not go to like the Music City Bowl or something like that. But because of everybody where they're at, um, and with Missouri only having one loss, with Auburn only with one loss, and perhaps Auburn winding up with only three in your scenario, uh, Auburn still would go in front of Georgia because it's a fan base thing and all this stuff. You've got A&M. The Florida Bowls are desperate to have A&M. You've got Missouri. You've got the Cotton Bowl, which Georgia would not go to anyway. You've got the Chick-fil-A Bowl, which I think is a very, the Peach Bowl is a very serious possibility for Georgia. You've got the Gator Bowl, which I think is a very serious possibility for Georgia. The fact that the Gators are not playing this season, the Gators are not projected to play, leaves open another game or two in Florida for other people because those Florida Bowls love to get the Gators. If I had to guess right now, if Auburn were to beat Georgia, I would say they would almost certainly play in the Sugar Bowl, unless Missouri were to upset Alabama in the championship game. If the curious thing is what happens to South Carolina, what happens to Auburn, what happens to Missouri, what happens to Texas A&M, what happens to Georgia. Those are the schools that is kind of hard. I mean, Mississippi maybe jumps up there and goes to a bowl, but it goes to an Eastern Side Bowl. I don't know, though. I mean, the Cotton Bowl is going to either, I don't think they're going to want Texas A&M again. I'm certain the Outback Bowl is not going to want South Carolina again. I guess. I don't know. But you have a couple of teams who, if South Carolina goes 10-2, they certainly would deserve the Capital One Bowl. The problem is everybody else is winning that much too, and South Carolina has a tough game left with Clemson. So everybody could wind up 9-3, 8-4, and then it's just kind of where does Mike Slive want to stick you? And to me, I think Georgia is probably looking at either the Gator Bowl because they haven't been there in about 25 years. Or they're looking at the Peach Bowl, and I think the Peach Bowl may say, hey, listen, if we're getting stuck with Miami, we want somebody who's going to sell some seats. And I think we know Georgia would fill up the Georgia Dome. J.M. Tulldog says, how important is Chris Conley's availability Saturday? Do you think he will significantly improve our chances of winning? I think he's just another guy that helps raise the level of skill on the field, which is very important. He knows the timing of Aaron Murray, which is vastly important, and I think he helps. Now, does he significantly help? No, because he's one player, and he would be normally, say, Georgia's number 4 or 5 option in the pass game, typically. Now, that's with Malcolm and Justin Scott Wesley, etc. So, does he help? Yes. Is it significant? No. Do you think any of our players want this game more than usual, given that Nick Marshall is a star at Auburn? Do they resent him and want revenge, given that he robbed a few teammates? I don't know about that part. I think the guys that Nick got caught taking stuff from play on offense completely, so none of them are out there running around trying to get him. I don't know. I think they know Nick. I think that that's not something that they immediately think of. But I'm sure they'd like to. Fans want to do it more than the players. That's just all there is to it. I mean, basically, Nick is working for another company now. He was let go from Georgia, and now he works for somebody else down the street. That's what it's like, I think, more than anything else. I think if you want to, I frankly think that's a wrong mindset going into a game. You have your particular responsibilities. You can't get too fired up about what is or what happened or what did not happen or how unfairly you were treated or if someone took something from you. The task at hand is the person in front of you. And for almost everyone on that field, on Saturday, that's not going to be Nick Marshall. That's going to be either the center or the nose guard that you're dealing with. And if you're worried about Nick Marshall exclusively rather than dealing with the person in front of you, Auburn's going to win. And this is from Danger Ranger 6969. Do you think in the future Georgia will lose the Auburn game because of the SEC schedule? Okay. What he's saying is, or he or she is saying, do you think that the Georgia-Auburn series is going to go away because of the SEC? Right now, no. I think the SEC is going to stay at 8 games, and I think that one of two things is either going to happen. Either they're going to go to a 9-game schedule, which I think is very unlikely right now, or Auburn is going to shift over to the East, which means Auburn and Georgia would always play one another anyway. I think Auburn shifting over to the East is something the SEC should seriously consider. They can keep Auburn, Alabama as the crossover game. Tennessee, could just get Arkansas or something like that, and Georgia could get, Texas A&M. Georgia's traditional rival in the West that they don't play now is Mississippi, but Georgia could get Bama. I mean, we don't know. Of course, no, they couldn't because Auburn would be the crossover there. That's hard to know the answer to. I know, if you juggled it and you said if Missouri goes to the West, which they naturally should. I mean, frankly, travel-wise, I would love that because it's ridiculous that I have to go all the way to Columbia, Missouri every other year. It's just stupid. It's kind of stupid there in the conference anyway, from a logistical standpoint of view. But, that they're in the Eastern Division is about as ridiculous as that's like saying Texas A&M should be in the East, and we're just it's as perverted as it could ever be geography wise. Do I think the SEC will move to 16 teams? I hope not, because it's gotten out of control as is. I am not a supporter, quite frankly, of these expansions. It makes no sense that the University of Missouri is in the Southeastern Conference. It's stupid. Now, if you're saying, okay, we're going to bring in a North Carolina State and Louisville. You're going to bring in North Carolina State and I don't even know. I mean, University of Memphis. There's really no good answer, and I think we've seen what we're going to see in terms of expansion for some time now. Notre Dame kind of ponying up with the ACC was something that needed to happen to slow a lot of other things down. We have some sanity right this second. But I hope not. I mean, the SEC that I knew when I was a child had 10 teams. And I think it was made better by adding 2 teams. Now, was South Carolina the right add at the time? At the time they were, and then they've grown into their spot. Arkansas the same way. South Carolina was available. South Carolina was there. It was an easy fix. There was no conference leaving. Arkansas was there. It was easy. Southwestern Conference was on the precipice of falling apart. It was very dirty. What the question though becomes: was South Carolina the right pick? Was Arkansas the right pick at the time? And that's kind of a false question because they were the only pick. I mean, looking back 20 years later, more than 20 years later now, those 2 teams were there. Should it have been Florida State? Probably. I mean, if you're talking about realistically who identifies better with the Southeastern Conference and what we do, I would say Florida State's a better fix or better mold into the conference. But South Carolina has really gotten better as a result of being in the SEC. What you don't want to do is add 6 teams other than the original 10, because the original 10 are legitimate SEC people. I mean, there's nothing strange about saying Florida is in the SEC, saying Georgia, saying Kentucky or whoever, because they've always been in the SEC. But when you start saying, oh, well, I mean, I think the SEC should seriously consider Louisville, I think the SEC should seriously consider Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, no, they're not. It just is odd, and I think we've expanded enough. Let's just let's make this. Let's go with what we've got. I would be all for getting rid of A&M in Missouri personally, just because it just University of Missouri does nothing for me. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean what do they add? And the answer is not very much. It just adds a more difficult game on the schedule every single season. Who is on the hotter seat? Mark Fox? Whose seat is hotter, Mark Fox or Will Muschamp? That's easy. Will Muschamp. Which is more likely to happen? Georgia beats Auburn in football, or Georgia beats Georgia Tech in basketball this week? Let me see if the Georgia Bulldogs are favored against Georgia Tech, because they probably are. I think they're both likely. I think they're both. I don't think they're either of them out of the question by any stretch. I think a sweep is difficult because it's two different situations, etc. But I mean, if I were, so Georgia and Tech are a coin flip right now. Tech is a 1-point favorite, actually. Excuse me. I personally think Georgia wins that game against Georgia Tech tomorrow night. We'll see. Georgia basketball is getting. It looked a lot better the other night than it did last season, almost the entire year. So they're going to have to play like that a lot. If they beat Georgia Tech, they will position themselves to have a pretty good pre-SEC season. It's going to be hard for me to imagine them beating Colorado out there, etc. But this is a winnable game for Georgia. They'll be playing at home. Georgia Tech is relatively young, and I think that's a game they should win. Okay, Dean Legge Show on Dog Post.